when you open your Bible to read the Gospel of Matthew, and the first thing that pops up is Jesus' genealogy, be honest, what do you typically do? Now, I know some of y'all are like, skip that. I don't really need to read this part. Or you might be one of those people who are reading them and then just using them wrong. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about those who try and use genealogies to date the earth, or one of those ones who use biblical genealogies to show the inconsistencies of the Bible. So, to cut down on the skipping and the misusing, I thought we should talk about biblical genealogies. But before we get into all that, I'm Erica Brown. I'm all about bringing biblical archaeology to the culture. So make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're following. We are modern Westerners, and sometimes we want to read the biblical texts like biblical genealogies like we would read a modern Western genealogy. Today, our genealogies are just these matter-of-factual biological records, right? Like, this is me, this is my parents, these are my parents' parents, and so on. And really, that's just all there is to them. And so when we read them, we just read them as line for line, precisional accounts. I don't know if precisional's a word or if you can use it that way, but you get what I'm saying, right? But that's not how biblical genealogies work. Remember, y'all, we've got to read and understand the Bible within the cultural and historical context of the ancient Near Eastern world, and not with a modern and Western context. And this means that we've got to look at some of the genealogical texts and artifacts of the ancient Near East. So in Mesopotamia, there are numerous genealogical inscriptions on stelas, like the one found on Assur-Nasir-Pal's II stela. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a hard one. Assur-Nasir-Pal II was an Assyrian king that reigned around 879 BCE. And the genealogical info on this stela is typical of what we call royal genealogies. From Egypt, we have genealogies like the genealogy of Ankhenset, this guy. And this one dates to the 22nd dynasty of ancient Egypt, around the reign of Shoshank V, which is right around 750 to 715 BCE. And it doesn't stop in Mesopotamia and Egypt, y'all. We have textual examples of genealogies from Ugaritic or Canaanite peoples. They were ancient Israel's ancient neighbor. And these genealogies date real early to around 1400 to 1200 BCE. And then we have numerous genealogies found in Greek literature dating between the 3rd century BCE and the 4th century CE. So as you can see, the writers of the Bible were not the only ones doing genealogies. So researchers looked at all these different genealogies and some different anthropological studies, and they found that the key to understanding ancient genealogies is to understand that they are all about function. Meaning that they were always written to serve some type of specific purpose. Sometimes these ancient genealogies were all about establishing some type of social order or social status. That's when you would write a genealogy to let people know that you are somebody important and they better put some respect on your name. But these would be more so for a local or community context. Sometimes ancient genealogies were all about politics. And this is when you need to let people know why you was the person who need to be in charge. Now, this would be more so for a regional or national context. Sometimes ancient genealogies were all about religious establishment. And this is when you need to let people know that I'm religiously legit because I come from a family of religiously legit people. Sometimes ancient genealogies were all about geographical connection. And that's when you need to let people know where you and your people came from and how y'all were connected to other people geographically. And listen to me, y'all. The function and the purpose of the genealogy determines the form of the genealogy. Yes, there are genealogical forms, 2 forms to be exact, the linear form and the segmented form. Now, the linear form is when you move from one person in one generation to another person in a different generation. For example, I am Erica. I am the daughter of V. She is the daughter of S. And she is the daughter of B. And she is the daughter of V. and so on and so on and so on. Now, the linear form is done to highlight or emphasize a particular person, and it could be the person at the beginning of the genealogy, or the person at the end of the genealogy, or both, or sometimes people in between. Really, the person or persons being emphasized could just vary. Now, the segmented form is when you list a person and their people from generation to generation. It looks more like the family tree we're used to seeing. So this one would look more so like, I am Erica, the second of V, the first of G, and V is the first child of 3 of M and S, and G is the first child of 5 of E and N, and so on and so on and so on. And the segmented form is more so about highlighting or emphasizing a particular group of people or a particular lineage. Sometimes ancient genealogies would combine these forms. And again, that's depending on the function and the purpose. Seriously, y'all, I cannot stress this enough. Ancient genealogies were all about function and purpose. And because ancient genealogies were all about function and purpose, there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of what researchers call genealogical fluidity. Genealogical fluidity is when a genealogical record is changed, adjusted, or altered to align with the specific requirements of its intended purpose and structure. Meaning sometimes a particular genealogy can be longer or shorter, meaning sometimes a person or a family is added or subtracted. Sometimes names or peoples from outside the biological family are inserted into a genealogy. Let me demonstrate this really quick. So let's say I want to show you how I'm connected to my granny Willa Patton, because I want to show you that I was connected to such an important woman who was an important figure within her community. Then my genealogy will look something like this. Erica, who is the daughter of G, who is the son of Willa Patton. Now, if you compare this genealogy with the genealogy I showed you earlier, you would be like, well, one of these is incorrect. And I'd be like, no, they're both correct. They're different because they have different purposes. One is more of a reflection of my biological genealogy, and it's true. And the other is more of a social reflection of our family's informal adoption into the family of Willa Patton, and it is true. Because, honey, ain't nobody gonna tell me that my granny was my granny, honey. And she was. And all of this, function and purpose, form of genealogy, fluidity of genealogy, all of this has to be considered when we come to biblical genealogy. And this is why you can't read or use biblical genealogies like you would use a modern genealogy. You can't use them to date the earth or disprove or prove the consistencies of the Bible. Those are not the function or purpose of biblical genealogies. And let's be clear, the ancient audience would have been more than okay with the different functions and purposes and forms and fluidity because that was their culture. Now, let's take this all back to Matthew 1. The good thing about the genealogy in Matthew 1 is that verse 17 lets you know the function and purpose of this genealogy. So verse 17 says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to Christ, 14 generations. The function and purpose of this genealogy is to show you that Jesus is the Christ or the Messiah that was to come through the line of Abraham and through the line of David. And if you notice, it's in linear form. It's in linear form because it wants to highlight Jesus or Abraham or David. And this point is likely reinforced by the presence of the number 14, which some scholars believe to be a very important symbolic biblical number. And so this is how we are to approach and read this biblical genealogy. Hey, if you enjoyed this discussion of biblical genealogies, make sure you like this video and share this video. And that's just so you know.